You think you know Pennsylvania laws until you hear this. Singing in your bathtub, sitting in a boat on a trailer, even how many people can live together were once illegal. These aren't jokes, myths, or internet rumors. They're real laws that still exist today, and the reasons behind them are even stranger. No singing in the bathtub, Pennsylvania's quietest crime. Imagine standing in your bathroom, warm water flowing, singing your favorite song at the top of your lungs. It feels harmless, relaxing, almost automatic. But according to an old Pennsylvania law, that simple moment could technically place you on the wrong side of history. This bizarre rule didn't come from lawmakers who hated music. It came from fear, real fear, at a time when bathrooms were some of the most dangerous rooms in the house. In the early 1900s, indoor plumbing was new, metal bathtubs were slippery, water temperatures were unregulated, and electrical wiring often ran dangerously close to moisture. People fainted from heat, slipped on porcelain floors, and drowned quietly in their own homes. Lawmakers believed singing caused people to relax too much, breathe deeply, lose awareness, and stay in hot water longer than was safe. As a result, local safety ordinances began discouraging unnecessary activity while bathing, including loud singing or excessive movement. Over time, these rules faded from enforcement, but many were never officially removed from municipal codes. Today, no one is being arrested for shower karaoke, yet the wording still technically exists in outdated legal language tied to household safety. The law doesn't function anymore, but it survives as a legal fossil, a reminder that early lawmakers often solved danger with restriction instead of education. Pennsylvania didn't outlaw music in the tub. It tried to regulate risk and simply forgot to update the paperwork. No buying or selling cars on Sunday, blue law. If you've ever tried to buy a car in Pennsylvania on a Sunday and found every dealership mysteriously closed, you weren't experiencing bad luck. You were experiencing the law. This rule comes from Pennsylvania's blue laws, dating back to the late 1930s, when lawmakers believed Sunday should be protected as a day of rest, worship, and family time. At the time, automobiles symbolized wealth, temptation, and social competition, and leaders feared that allowing major purchases on Sundays would pull people away from churches and homes. So Pennsylvania banned vehicle sales on that day entirely. What's strange is not how the law started, but how it survived. Over the decades, many blue laws were repealed, but car dealerships quietly supported keeping this one. A guaranteed day off meant fair competition, predictable schedules, and protection from 7-day business pressure. Today, the religious motivation is largely gone, but the regulation remains fully enforceable. You can browse cars online, negotiate prices, even test drive on private property. But the moment money changes hands on a Sunday, it becomes illegal. This law still affects thousands of buyers every year, not because of faith, but because tradition and business convenience aligned. Pennsylvania didn't forget this law. It preserved it, turning an old moral rule into a modern commercial shield. Fishing with your hands is illegal. Picture yourself standing knee-deep in a Pennsylvania stream when a fish swims close enough to grab. Instinct kicks in. You reach down and you catch it with your bare hands. In Pennsylvania, that moment could earn you a fine. This law comes from the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Code, which strictly regulates how fish may be taken from public waters. Hand fishing, often called noodling, is banned because it causes serious environmental damage. Pulling fish from nesting areas destroys breeding cycles, injures protected species, and disrupts fragile aquatic ecosystems. Unlike many weird laws that linger unused, this one is still actively enforced by game wardens. Pennsylvania requires approved equipment such as rods, reels, and legal nets to ensure fairness and sustainability. Your hands, no matter how skilled, don't qualify. The law exists because humans are very good at taking more than nature can replace, especially when rules are unclear. Even though grabbing a fish feels natural and impressive, the state treats it as an uncontrolled harvesting method. This rule may sound strange, but it reflects a long history of conservation efforts designed to protect wildlife from human impulse. Sometimes the weirdest laws survive not because they're outdated, but because they still work. Sleeping on top of a refrigerator outdoors is illegal. At first glance, this law sounds like a joke. Who would even think to sleep on top of a refrigerator, let alone outdoors? But in mid-20th century Pennsylvania, this became enough of a problem that lawmakers felt the need to address it. During the post-war boom, refrigerators became common household items, and older, broken units were often discarded into backyards, alleys, or vacant lots. Children played on them, adults sat on them during outdoor gatherings, and in some cases, people actually slept on top of these heavy metal appliances during summer heat waves or outdoor drinking parties. The danger wasn't comfort, it was collapse. Refrigerators could tip, doors could trap, and sharp metal edges caused serious injuries. Pennsylvania's local safety ordinances began targeting hazardous misuse of large appliances, especially when left outdoors. Sleeping on top of a refrigerator was categorized as reckless endangerment, not because of morality, but because emergency responders kept getting called to completely preventable accidents. Over time, refrigerators became safer, disposal methods improved, and the behavior faded. But the legal language never fully disappeared. Today, no officer is patrolling yards looking for rooftop sleepers, yet the rule still exists in old municipal codes as a reminder of how laws often chase behavior rather than logic. It's not that Pennsylvania feared naps. It feared lawsuits, injuries, and a generation treating junk appliances like furniture. You can't be governor. If you've participated in a duel. Long before social media arguments and televised debates, disputes between powerful men were sometimes settled with pistols at dawn. Dueling was once considered an acceptable way for politicians and elites to defend their honor, and Pennsylvania wanted no part of it. This law traces back to early constitutional eligibility clauses meant to separate leadership from violence. Lawmakers believed that anyone willing to resolve conflict through a duel lacked the judgment required to govern a state. By banning duel participants from holding the office of governor, Pennsylvania made a clear statement. Public power should never come from personal bloodshed. The rule wasn't symbolic, it was preventative. Dueling caused real deaths, political instability, and cycles of revenge. Over time, dueling faded into history, replaced by courts and ballots, but the eligibility restriction remained written into old legal language. Today it feels absurd, because dueling itself is obsolete, yet the law still technically exists as a legal artifact. No modern candidate has ever been disqualified for it, but the clause stands as a warning from the past, reminding us that leadership was once protected not from corruption, but from gunfire at sunrise. Pennsylvania didn't repeal the law because the problem disappeared on its own. It's illegal to put pretzels in bags in Philadelphia, historic ordinance. Philadelphia is famous for its soft pretzels, but few people realize those twisted snacks once caused enough concern to inspire regulation. This unusual ordinance dates back to the late 1800s, when street vendors sold pretzels from open carts across the city. At the time, food safety standards barely existed, and city officials worried about contamination, deception, and price manipulation. Vendors would sometimes bag pretzels to make them appear fresher or larger quantities than they actually were. By banning the bagging of pretzels, officials hoped to keep transactions transparent and reduce unsanitary handling. The rule wasn't about bread, it was about consumer protection before modern health departments existed. As food laws evolved, the ordinance lost relevance, but like many local rules, it was never formally erased. Today, pretzels are bagged everywhere without consequence, yet the regulation technically remains buried in outdated municipal language. It survives not because it matters, but because removing old laws requires effort, and cities often focus on writing new rules instead. Philadelphia didn't outlaw pretzels in bags. It simply never bothered to delete a rule that time made meaningless. Women required a permit to wear makeup, historic local ordinance. This law sounds outrageous today, but in early Pennsylvania towns, makeup was once treated as deception rather than fashion. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, cosmetics were associated with fraud, immoral behavior, and social manipulation. Lawmakers believed makeup allowed women to misrepresent their appearance, potentially misleading men into marriage or financial commitments under false pretenses. Some local ordinances required women to obtain permission or permits before wearing cosmetics in public, framing makeup as a form of disguise rather than self-expression. The intent wasn't beauty regulation, it was moral control. These rules emerged during a time when women had limited legal rights and personal appearance was seen as a public concern. As cultural attitudes changed and women gained independence, enforcement quietly vanished. However, because many local ordinances were never formally repealed, references to cosmetic restrictions still technically exist in archived municipal codes. Today, no permits are issued, no fines are written, and the law survives only as a reminder of how deeply governments once tried to regulate personal identity. Pennsylvania didn't just police faces, it policed freedom, then slowly backed away without cleaning the legal record. No more than 16 women may live together. Brothel classification law. At first, this law feels absurd and discriminatory, but its origin lies in early attempts to regulate prostitution rather than housing. In the 1800s and early 1900s, Pennsylvania used numerical household limits to define brothels because direct regulation of prostitution was legally difficult. Lawmakers believed that if more than a certain number of unmarried women lived together, the residence must be operating as a house of ill repute. The number 16 became a legal threshold, not based on logic, but on enforcement convenience. This rule allowed authorities to shut down suspected brothels without proving specific criminal acts. Over time, society changed, housing patterns evolved, and women began living together for education, work, and independence. The law, however, never adapted. While it is no longer enforced and would not survive modern constitutional scrutiny, the language still exists in outdated legal definitions. Today, it stands as an example of how governments once used indirect laws to control behavior they didn't know how to regulate openly. Pennsylvania didn't repeal the rule because its original target vanished, leaving behind a strange numerical ghost in the law books. Fortune-telling for profit is illegal. For centuries, fortune-telling was viewed not as entertainment, but as exploitation. Pennsylvania, like many states, passed laws banning fortune-telling for money because officials believed it preyed on fear, grief, and desperation. During times of war, economic depression, and high mortality, people turned to psychics for reassurance, often paying money they couldn't afford. Lawmakers framed fortune-telling as fraud by default, arguing that predicting the future for profit was inherently deceptive. The law didn't ban belief, it banned charging for certainty. Over time, astrology, tarot, and psychic readings became mainstream entertainment and enforcement faded. Today, psychic shops operate openly, often protected under free speech and entertainment exemptions. Yet the original statute still technically exists, preserved in old legal language that labels paid fortune-telling as unlawful unless clearly marked as entertainment. This creates a strange legal contradiction where belief is protected, performance is tolerated, but profit remains suspicious on paper. Pennsylvania didn't outlaw mysticism. It tried to protect vulnerable citizens, then failed to modernize the wording once culture caught up. You cannot ride in a boat on a trailer on a highway. This law exists because common sense didn't always exist on highways. When recreational boating became popular in mid-20th century Pennsylvania, people began transporting boats on trailers without fully understanding the danger. Some individuals thought it was acceptable to sit inside the boat while it was being towed, treating it like a moving seat rather than unsecured cargo. Lawmakers quickly realized the risk. Boats aren't designed for road travel, have no restraints, and can shift violently during turns or sudden stops. Accidents occurred where passengers were thrown from boats onto highways, often with fatal results. Pennsylvania responded by banning any person from riding in a boat while it is mounted on a trailer being transported. This rule still exists today and is enforceable under traffic safety regulations. Unlike many weird laws, this one remains practical, even if it sounds absurd at first. Modern drivers rarely attempt this, but the law stays in place because physics hasn't changed. Pennsylvania didn't create this rule to be strange. It created it because someone once tried something incredibly stupid and paid the price. Hunting is illegal in cemeteries. Hunting laws in Pennsylvania are extensive, but few are as unsettling as the explicit ban on hunting in cemeteries. This rule exists because cemeteries were once common open land, especially in rural areas where wildlife roamed freely among headstones. Hunters occasionally pursued animals into burial grounds, creating safety risks, property damage, and deep public outrage. Pennsylvania responded by clearly prohibiting hunting in cemeteries, not only to protect the dead, but to protect the living. Gunfire near graves endangered mourners, caretakers, and nearby residents. Beyond safety, the law also addressed respect. Cemeteries were recognized as sacred spaces deserving protection from exploitation. Today, the idea of hunting in a cemetery feels unthinkable, yet the law remains written because it still serves a purpose. Wildlife still enters graveyards, and boundaries can blur without clear rules. Pennsylvania didn't assume decency would be enough. It put respect into law to prevent the unthinkable from becoming routine. Using goldfish or koi as fishing bait is illegal. At first, banning goldfish as fishing bait sounds oddly specific, but the reasoning behind it is deeply environmental. Goldfish and koi are not native species to Pennsylvania's waterways. When released into lakes and rivers, they disrupt ecosystems, reproduce aggressively, and destroy native habitats. Early anglers sometimes used live goldfish as bait, releasing unused fish afterward without realizing the long-term damage. Pennsylvania's Fish and Boat authorities responded by banning the use of ornamental fish as bait entirely. The law exists to prevent invasive species from spreading through careless fishing practices. Unlike many outdated laws, this one is still actively enforced because the threat is ongoing. Once an invasive species enters a water system, it can permanently alter it. Today, anglers are required to use approved bait types to protect local wildlife. This law may sound strange, but it reflects a hard-learned lesson. Even something as small as a discarded bait fish can cause irreversible damage. Pennsylvania didn't outlaw goldfish for cruelty. It outlawed carelessness disguised as convenience. These strange Pennsylvania laws may sound unbelievable, but they remind us how fear, safety, and tradition once shaped everyday life. Some laws fade from use, but history keeps them written, quietly waiting in the fine print.